Alright, so I'm going to review this book, Cannabis Capital, and I'm just going to talk about it while James is coming out. He's having squash, Hubbard squash with chili inside, and cilantro on top, and cornbread for his side. So I mean that's gluten-free if for people who don't eat gluten, and it's a very healthy meal for winter. It's wonderful. Now, if you don't eat corn, well, weird. Anyway, he's having carrot juice. I forgot to put turmeric in it. I was gonna. Oh well. And I have a plate of garlic, so that's a whole head of garlic that I'm taking in the evenings now. And Smart Woman tomato soup, which is my homemade soup. And so I'm going to start with Cannabis Capital, How to Get Your Business Funded in the Cannabis Economy by Ross O'Brien, entrepreneur, press publisher. Apparently Canada was the first G7 country to fully legalize marijuana for both medical and recreational use in 2018. Page 9, cannabis consumers spent more than $340 billion globally in 2018. And this is in the billions, this is divided up. So Asia spent the most, 133 billion. North America, 86 billion. Europe, 68 billion. Africa, 37 billion. 10 billion in Oceania. Can you explain where Oceania is? I am so sorry.
Why? Was that
Well,
mine?
no, yeah, you go ahead and drink that. It's just, I asked you a question right while you were drinking, which was
It doesn't matter.
kind of rude of me.
No, not really. I just meant you'd have to wait. It's not as though you had held me to gunpoint and said answer now.
Yeah.
So, am I orange all over? If I got an orange
No,
mustache? Well, that's good.
Which
Hey.
is surprising. Usually you get a
Yeah.
good mustache.
Yeah, I look like Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
Mixture of Ronald McDonald and Groucho Marx.
Sure.
So, yeah, Oceania is basically the South Pacific.
Oh, okay.
So all those islands, archipelagos, like presumably Indonesia.
Well,
Oftentimes
he
it's
put down
combined
$2
with
billion
Australia.
in the Caribbean. Caribbean's different than Oceania?
Okay, so the Caribbean is like between
Whoops.
the United States and South America, right?
Okay.
So it's things like
That's
Cuba, Haiti.
Oh, it's like so that
Dominican
yeah, that's
Republic,
not the Pacific.
Jamaica.
That's the
Well, it's an extension of the Atlantic, right?
yeah.
So yeah, the South Pacific is things like I presume it includes the big archipelago that makes up Indonesia and Borneo and the Philippines probably. I don't know if they include Taiwan, but Taiwan could be included there. But definitely places like Fiji, the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, or the Gilbert Islands. I think Kiribati is an attempt to say Gilbert. Can you see how it's related?
Wow.
Kiribati. They changed the L to R. So, and on it goes. There's a huge number of islands out there, right?
Yeah.
Samoa. It might include Hawaii, Easter Islands, so on and so forth.
So yeah, I found that
that's what
interesting.
Oceania is.
I found the breakdown interesting because we always think of Jamaicans as being the big pot smokers, but maybe they're just growing enough that they're not buying it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, are they giving gross numbers? Jamaica's a small place, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very small.
Okay.
Cuba is much, much larger, right? So Jamaica, I think, is part of the Greater Antilles. There's the Lesser Antilles, which are these it's funny how it runs like this. You got the Greater Antilles here, and they seem to get smaller and smaller as they arc down to North America or South America. So it's actually quite a graceful figure to kind of describe. But yeah, which one of the funny things, like you'll get people, lots of them, and I think it might even started before Marx. Marx was saying slavery was the start of capitalism. and it was what made the West, you know, great economically, not great ethically. And I'm going, what the, you know, like the places where England were producing rum were really, 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 really small. Jamaica's really, 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 really small. And there weren't a lot of slaves doing it and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of people, a fair number of people, made money off slavery. Strictly speaking, people who run plantations aren't capitalists. Capitalists aren't, until recently with machinery, aren't farmers. They aren't farmers. Traditionally, farmers were against capitalism. Landowners were against capitalism. That's who capitalists had their revolutions against. The farmers were called, and landowners were called, aristocrats. So people who say that kind of garbage, read your history and stop being intellectually dishonest. In other words, stop engaging in fake history. You know, all you do is you give ammunition to idiots like Donald Trump. So that now he says anything that you guys say is fake. And the trouble is, a lot of what you guys say is fake. Some of the stuff you do get right. Your batting average is a little bit better than Donald Trump's, but it ain't good enough. I'm tired of you guys lying to yourselves and then lying to other people by extension. So do a little bit of history. Stop making stuff up. What happens with a lot of these guys and gals is, you know, I really want things to be this way, therefore they must have been that way. That's the way they operate. Man, oh man, I'm tired of you guys. Tired, sick and tired. Anyway.
So that had nothing to do with this book.
Yeah.
That was
Sorry
the last
about
book that I was talking about today that I knew James would get excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can put up with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
I can. I just laugh, you know. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes I laugh till I cry. But.
Mm-hmm. Plate of garlic done. Okay. 27. 50% of venture capital investments will go out of business and produce zero return.
20%?
50%.
50%. That sounds like more. Yeah. It's a low.
VCs are institutional investors, general partnership between investors to pool capital. Cannabis is a federally illegal Schedule I narcotic in the U.S. So the moral clause prohibits traditional VC investors from investing in cannabis businesses. 32. It's a common practice to set up something called a special purpose vehicle, a legal entity set up for the sole purpose of collecting a group of investors to invest in a company. 43. The Secure and Fair Enforcement Safe Banking Act of 2019 creates protections for the depository institutions that provide financial services to state-compliant businesses. 52. 80% of the highly publicized tech-founder venture-backed businesses will fail within 10 years. 95% of founders are running businesses that don't fit public perceptions of entrepreneurship. Most founders are replicative. They are older and more diverse, have spent more time working in other companies, and are more successful, profitable over the long term. 58. Vision statement. Why your business exists. 74. Write up executive summary last. 4 or 5 pages. Summarize the entire scope of business plan. He includes the company's mission statement. The final section can include summary of the transaction that's being pursued, amount of capital, and what it's being used for, and where the company is projected to be as a result of that investment. It's helpful to conclude the narrative with a statement about the goals of the business with regard to an exit strategy. Chart out management team. Investors need to know what your value proposition is and what you sell, product, service section. Clearly explain how you will make your money in your business model. The opportunity section should start out at macro level, industry sector. Don't spend time addressing what's already known. Who is your market? How much can you exploit them for? I put in brackets. Sales marketing section, operating plan, complete competition. The financial section should include a profit and loss statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheet. For companies operating over a year, include historical statements and projections. Regulatory considerations, exit strategy, future opportunities. 85. Review your revenue projection. Did you exceed it within a 10% margin of error? The larger the margin of error, the more fundamental problems there are with the assumptions you made. So if you're making more money, that's actually you didn't think it through well, right? So that's something to consider too. 89. Great entrepreneurs seem to be able to do more with less. 90. He and many investors skip to the numbers when reviewing a proposed investment. 92. Balance sheet, assets versus liability. 93. Cash flow statement, sources info from balance sheet and income statement. 94. The income statement is the profit and loss statement, revenues versus expenses. 122. Investors choose not to invest 50% of the time due to regulatory issues, 40% lack of good ideas, 5 for each social issues or novelty of industry. 124. The earlier the stage of maturity of the private business, the greater the risk profile, the higher the failure rate. 129. Private company value drivers. Assets, intangible assets such as intellectual property, historical future cash flow, management team. 130. 5 main analytical approaches to value company. Asset equity, book value or liquidation value. 2. Income methodology, historical performance and projection. 3. Market comparable analysis, purchase price to revenue, external data of comparable companies. Sensitivity analysis, impact of up and down revenue. 5. Replacement value. Net asset value, total tangible assets, intangible assets, and liability, or minus intangible assets and plus liability. 131. Discounted cash flow model identifies intrinsic value of a company, can be complicated. Investors want to see the trade-off for an alternative vehicle of investment. 133. Total enterprise value is the calculated value of the company debt-free compared to the other company. TV equals market capitalization plus debt minus cash. 145. Organic growth. Growing business with internal resources. Inorganic growth, find partnership with another business. As a rule, crowdfunding is not suitable avenue to selling equity in your company. The successful crowdfunding platforms such as Indiegogo and Kickstarter are online retailers who pre-sell a product before it is in final production. So that's page 157 if you're interested in that. 186. Presentations should be 30 minutes or less. If sections are too detailed, put them in the appendix. 208. Confirmatory due diligence refers to the diligence that an investor underlines when the decision has been made to fund an investment once details are confirmed to the first round of due diligence. And that's a quote from the book. The whole book's written like that. It's really hard to read.
It's legalese kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's, even though there's little really said, what is meant by due diligence? It's doing one's homework.
Yeah.
That's it. I can sum it up really quickly and in a way that you can understand. He can't. Nobody would want to read this book.
Did you say?
You can look at it.
Okay.
I'll mention it later. Investors may be wary to invest because of being perceived or actual reputational risk of being associated with cannabis business. 218. 223. Anti-dilution provision protects preferred stockholder. Company prefers to use weighted average. An investor prefers to use full ratchet. They would be able to convert shares to money and double their shares with upcoming financing. So 224. Weighted average, anti-dilution, conversion price. I go through that there. You can look it up if you want to. 225. Drag-along rights give majority investors the ability to sell a company to a third party without consent from minority shareholders. In a merger, the minority shareholder agrees to vote in favor of the merger. Tag-along rights are similar but guarantee minority shareholders the right to sell their shares in the company at the same time and under the same conditions as the majority shareholders. That's important to know because if you're looking for funding, you're probably not going to be one of the majority shareholders, I'm guessing. But I don't know. Anyway, 226, right of first refusal. The company has the first right to purchase founder shares before they're offered to a third party. The preferred shareholder has then the right before the third party. Demand registration right allows holders of a certain percentage of registrable securities to require that The company register its shares after a certain period of time, 3 to 5 years after investment, or 6 months after IPO is traditional. Piggyback registration rights lets holders register shares, participate in the registration of any other class of shares by the company. Preferred stockholder has the right or has to demand information rights, such as quarterly financial statements, right to receive annual audited financial statements. 232, when an investor owns less than 50% of a company, they're considered a minority investor. 246, Ross holds an MBA from Fordham University and a Bachelor in Business, Marketing and Management from Ferris State University. He holds Series 79 and 63 securities licenses. He worked with a New York investment banking firm on Wall Street, was a manager at Geller & Company and Associates, VP at JP Morgan Chase. And I was wondering if he is writing since, like, maybe he was on Wall Street banking when that whole fiasco went down. I don't know, right? That's what I'm thinking when
you hear JP Morgan, you should be laughing.
Yeah. I'm just going to see how much time you have to talk about that. I'll let you know. You can keep talking. Yeah, you have lots of time.
So Pauline got hold of this because she knows I like science. Well, I like real science, not. I don't like the scientific establishment and stuff like that.
I can hold it.
Scientific method. So this is elemental, and I like the way they.
It is cute. It's a great cover.
Yep.
Which I should compare it to this one, which is really, this is a load of crap. This cover. Basically, he wrote that book. It's just a business book. You could apply those principles to anything, but he's trying to sell his education, sell his product, right, with cannabis, with this big market that's opened up. And the book is shitty. I mean, honestly, you should take the Gale courses that are offered for free at the public library in business, and you'll get way more out of it than you'll get out of that. Okay.
Did you notice who did the kind of the blurb at the front, the introduction?
No, I didn't.
Former President Vicente Fox of Mexico.
Really?
Well, I think if we check Vicente Fox, we find a record of corruption, or, like drug corruption. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I'm going to check that up. You remind me if
funny.
you would. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's just not the kind of person. Excuse me, that I'd want to. He was a conservative Mexican president, but really. I mean, not like an aristocrat, but kind of like Bush Jr. Sort of stuff. At any rate, let me just, speaking of introduction, so this is a popularization. Fairly good idea, it's kind of going through the periodic table. It's got some good stories, but this is the level of thinking in here.
That one came from Tabor Public Library for us, I noticed. So thank you, Tabor, for lending us your book.
So, this is kind of the introduction. A writer on popular health website was recently moaning about chemicals in our food and what we can do to keep food chemical-free.
Oh yes, I remember.
These scaremongers seem to think that chemicals are toxins created by lunatics in lab coats, but this view is far too narrow. Chemicals aren't just the bubbling liquids you see in test tubes, they are the test tubes themselves. The clothes you're wearing, the air you're breathing, the page you're currently looking at are all chemicals. If you don't want chemicals in your food, then I'm afraid it's too late. Food is chemicals. Okay.
Yes, but they're not all the same chemicals?
Yeah.
In the same amounts? In the same forms?
So here's the deal. This individual, Tim James, he's a passionate science educator, and I presume he's got some sort of science degree or stuff like that. He doesn't boast about it, but anyway. Dedicated to the students of Northgate High School. So I'm afraid he might teach at a high school. At any rate, it doesn't matter. The deal is, what do you do? Anyway, there we go. Tim James, if you're watching this, you're indulging in actually the informal logical fallacy of equivocation, and I'll translate that for you. The logic of two terms, and I'll translate that for you. a second time. What you're doing is you are taking what one person says and you're changing what they're meaning by it. And so you're taking one word, but it means differently than the way you're using it. There are all sorts of words. Almost every word, if you look in a dictionary, will have many different meanings.
Sure.
And so when someone says they don't want chemicals in the food, they are talking about stuff that's done by people in lab coats. They're talking about chemicals that aren't natural in the foods that people are eating. And those stuff, generally, it's good to avoid chemicals. Like I'm taking a really strong chemical. Basically it's thalidomide, or very closely related to thalidomide, and I need it to help extend my fight against cancer. But I wouldn't recommend it to anyone else. I wouldn't say, hey, works for me.
Yeah, let's just mix some in
Remember
your
where I
soup,
was
Polly.
8.5 years ago, and look at me now. It does wonders for you. It's best to avoid chemicals unless it's kind of like an emergency. So in your foods, it's probably better to eat natural. Yeah, exactly right. It's probably best to eat natural and avoid chemicals in that first sense of the word. But yeah, in the extended sense, everything is chemical. So this guy thinks he's being really smart, but he's actually being really dumb. So get ready. I mean, it's a fairly easy read. He writes reasonably well. And
I can keep
stuff like that.
holding it.
Well, I'm finished basically.
Oh,
that's
that's
all
it.
I'm saying.
Okay.
So if you're looking for an easy, kind of like high school read or something like that, go for it. Don't pay any money for it.